remember one year getting a sled. I mean, that was it. And so you didn't have the money to buy things like that. And a lot of times the thing wasn't available. They weren't even made yet, like television. Okay, and I started high school in 1948. And at that time, everybody, the kids that were going to come into school, and incidentally, I went to an all-boys high school. There were no girls. And that was a rude awakening, because when I got to college, now there were girls in the class, and there were lay women teachers, which in grade school I had nuns, and you didn't know what was under that habit. And then in high school, all our teachers were brothers. So they were religious, unmarried men. Or we did have some priests too. But everybody was afraid of the seniors, that the seniors were going to get you. So you watched what you were doing. You had a locker. You had to wear a tie. For 4 years in high school, I wore the same tie. And every day, the first time I went in, I tied the tie. And then after that, I only slid it down a little bit, took it off over my head, hung it in my locker. Next day, I put it on and zipped it up.
Did you play sports?
That was a thing that most of the guys were really interested in. The school was a cathedral high school. Today it's called Althoff. And football was a big sport. Basketball and baseball, those were the three sports that you had. I played football 4 years, played basketball 2 years, and I played baseball 4 years. When I graduated from high school was 1952. We had a thing going on where soldiers were coming back had come back around 1945 from the Second World War. So obviously there's going to be a big spike in the birth rate. And the state decided that we're not going to have enough teachers if we don't do something. So they offered 4-year scholarships to state universities. And I was given one of them. But you had to agree to go into teaching, which I did.
So what university did you go to?
I went to Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. My sister was married to Chuck Stuckey. Stuckey's a big name around Belleville. And he went to Carbondale to school, and they lived there. So I would go down and visit them, and that's how I kind of got involved with that. When I started college, a cousin of mine who had just come back from the Navy was going to college, but he was finishing his. So I kind of tagged along with him, and he was a big help to me, in getting started and roaming around the campus. It was very different, of course, from high school, that one class you'd have maybe on Tuesday and Thursday, and that's all. And so it was very different, but we got started. I took a lot of interviews. And, for example, I interviewed in Aledo, Illinois, in Mattoon, Illinois, Chester, Illinois, Marissa, Illinois, and here in Belleville. On the day that we were married, when I graduated from college, on that day, I made the choice that I would go to Marissa, Illinois. So that was kind of a big decision. when I was younger, about 7th grade, I met up with 2 men, the Conrath brothers, and these guys, they were making something out where I lived. It was a miniature golf course, and I got to know them pretty good, and we liked each other, and they decided they wanted to build houses. Okay, so I helped them a little bit, picking stuff up and that, and eventually worked into a job. All right, they had bought some ground in the east end of Belleville, and we built a house there. And this one day, I was finished painting a window in a bedroom, and I could look out across a field, and I saw this girl walking from this house to another house. So I said to them, who is that? And they said, well, that's that guy's wife over there. Well, it turned out it was his sister. And I thought, I remember thinking, boy, she really looks good. And they when they said, we think that's his wife, I said, man, some guys, they get all the breaks. Well, so one thing led to another. She had a little brother, and he would come and hang around. I knew how you did that. And we'd talk to him and grill him on about his sister. Finally, he brought her over, and so we got to know each other. And now we're into the fall, and all at once I get a phone call from her, and she asked me to go on a hayride. So the first date that we had, she engineered it. Yeah.
So how long did you date?
All right, she was going to be a sophomore, and I was going to be a senior. So we dated from there on and all through college. So we dated for 7 years. And when we really got serious and talked about maybe getting married, I said that I wouldn't get married until I was finished with college. So when I I graduated on the 6th of June, and we were married on the 1st of August. And we were married at St. Luke's Church, and Father Calhoun married us. And we didn't have anything. So the guys, these Conrath brothers, they said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, we're going to live there with her parents until we move down to Marissa. And he said, well, where are you going on the honeymoon? I said, we're not. Oh, that's terrible. You have to go on a honeymoon. Okay, tell you what. So they gave me a car, and they gave me $50. That was our wedding present. So we were able to have a weekend. In 1959, Luann was born, and Pat was born in 1960. Luann graduated from Illinois State University, and she's been a bacteriologist at St. Elizabeth's for about, 30 years or something like that. In fact, she was just 57 years old. And
Son?
And Pat, he graduated from Southern Illinois University and Purdue University. He got his master's degree from Purdue University. And he works for Boeing Aircraft. He had worked for McDouglas Donald, and then when they became Boeing, then. So he's worked for them for a pretty long time. Luann and her husband have 2 boys, Kurt and Drew. Actually, he's Andrew, but we call him Drew. And Kurt is married and lives in Elburn, Illinois, which is up by Chicago. And he works for a company that provide workers for different industries. And his wife works for the same company, and her father owns the company. So that always makes it good. And Drew is a junior, I guess you'd call him, or a third-year college student at Northern Illinois University. And Pat has 2 children. Emily is, 13, I think? She's in the 8th grade. And his son, David, is a sophomore at Missouri University. Well, as a parent, you're directly involved with your kids 24 hours a day. And you have to make a lot of decisions. With grandkids, I think emotionally, you're much more in tune, but at the same time, somebody else has to make the decisions. So, but we're real extremely involved with all the kids. Our daughter lives just like maybe 100 yards away from us, and Pat lives in Chesterfield, Missouri. My grandma and grandpa Schaefer lived in Smithton, and I know we didn't have a lot of money at all, and we think that sometimes on the weekend we wouldn't have had anything to eat. So my parents would call a cab, and the cab would drive us to Smithton. We never had a car. We didn't have a car until my brother graduated from high school and needed a vehicle for the prom. That was the first car that my parents ever had. So we went to Smithton, and Sunday, December the 7th, we were sitting there, and the adults were doing their usual talking and whatever. And my grandpa had a stand-up Victrola with a little radio about yay big on the top of it. They broke into the program and said that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I knew my dad was scared because he wasn't of an age where he would be drafted, but if things really got bad, there's no telling how deep they would go into the age. So the thing of it is, though, that the war, it was a really bad thing. I remember going to church on Sunday, and the priest would get up to give his sermon, but he would start out by announcing the names of soldiers who had either been wounded or killed during that week. So there was a lot of really bad things. But my dad and mom were actually saved because my dad was able to get a job at Scott Air Base. Before that time, the only job that I knew where where my mom actually kept a record of what he earned was when he drove a bakery truck around town to people's houses, and he made from between $9 to $14 a week.